Well, if not now, when? And if not at all, how much longer are we prepared to go on with other terrorist groups perhaps engaging in the same sort of atrocity that we saw on September the 11th? So I think there was a certain inevitability about it. It was a brave decision, but I personally believe that it was the right decision to say that this isn't just a battle against one terrorist group, and many of them are interlinked. We may find that out later on this particular occasion. Many of them are interlinked. I've no means of knowing whether that is the case on this particular instance, but generally many of these groups are interlinked. And if you deal with one small aspect of it, and another part of the terrorist community comes back a year later with another attack, I think people would say, well, why didn't you see that might happen? Why didn't you say, well, now we have the momentum, we will try and deal with the problem as a whole? I think you would do. And I think it is right for the administration to declare that as its aim, and right for the British to support them. Well, I'll be talking a fair bit tonight about what has happened over the last 6 weeks, and what I think is likely to happen in the future as a result of the last 6 weeks. But I won't only be talking about that. I'll be talking about some of the changes we are now seeing in the world in which the students at this university are going to march out into in a couple of years' time when they finish their degrees here, is going to be a very different world from the one that existed even 10 years ago. And it'll be very different again in 20 years. Now, I think some of the messages about that are self-evident. I think opportunity is going to be greater in the next 10 years than it has ever been before. They're going to face different challenges. We don't have a world polarized between East and West, between the Russian superpower and the United States superpower and their relative military blocs. That has gone. We now live in a world where there's only one superpower, and in terms of wars and problems of that sort, conversely, because the grisly apparatus of the Cold War is over, you are more likely to get smaller regional wars. You are more likely to be involved in peacekeeping. But predominantly, you're looking at a problem which will require you to try increasingly to spread the economic well-being that we in the West have come to be used to over the past 20 or 30 years to wider parts of the world who are not used to it yet, and who look with envy and sometimes resentment at the wealth that exists in the West generally. And unless we, the next generation, the students leaving the school, begin to address that problem over the next decades, we're going to find ample opportunity for those who wish to whip up hate against the West to do so. So what I would say to young people today is the world is smaller than ever it was. The range of opportunities are wider than ever they were. There is nothing these days that a student with the ability, the luck, and the aptitude cannot achieve if they wish to achieve it. There is nowhere in the world they cannot visit, nothing they cannot see. They will see and do and know things that my generation and previous generations never dreamed was possible. So I think they should be very optimistic about their future. I don't think they should be downbeat because of the bubble you referred to that they've been living in over the past month or so. Well, I think people's perception of politicians is generally right about 50 years after they're dead. So I will watch from wherever I may be and see what it is on that occasion. But I think in the short term, it's often a totally disjointed view that people have. The essence of politics is whether you seek to do something that is going to have a long-term impact rather than be popular in the short term. And many of the things that have a long-term impact are very unpopular in the short term. They can often be vilified in the short term. But it is whether they turn out to be right in the long term that matters. And to give you two illustrations, if I may, looking back at my own career. When I began the Irish peace process, very few people imagined that we'd reached the circumstance that we've now reached. Very few people imagined that. And there was a huge amount of hostility to me having anything to do with people who were engaged in support for terrorist activities. That looks a little different today. And I suppose if you look at the state of the British economy when I inherited it and the state of the British economy when I left, you would wonder, how did he manage to lose an election? But of course, the things that you do in order to achieve that change are often very unpopular. And then other events occur as well. So that is why I say you need a proper perspective of years before you can judge anyone. Now there was one more, I think. Yeah. I think it may have changed the world. I don't think it's particularly changed Europe. Certainly not my party's attitude towards Europe, or my party's varying attitudes towards Europe, to be more precise. But I think it has shaken up the diplomacy and alliances around the world in a way that very few people would have imagined in the immediate aftermath of that attack. I think the world looks very different, with alliances you would never have believed possible, likely to become possible as a result of September the 11th, the response to September the 11th, and the need for alliances as a result of that response, and the need for action that is yet to come that will sustain those alliances through the long term. I think that combination, that sequence of events is going to make a very material difference, I think, to the way our world is structured, but not especially within Europe. Great. Thank you all very much indeed. Nice to see you.
Thank you. The Right Honourable John Major. The speech begins at 7:30 at Kresge Auditorium, and I'll meet you media folks. I guess the balcony will be kind of the meeting point anytime after 6:30. Thanks for being here this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Major, very much.